Amit, this is the first time that I can actually welcome you with a huge smile on our face. We have some really good news to cover at last. After 2 horrific years, 734 days of anguish, we've seen Israel and Hamas agree to this ceasefire deal. You've seen signs and images of joy in Israel and in the streets of Gaza. Just if you can give us your perspective there in Israel, having covered all of this, how significant is this moment right now, emotionally, militarily, for Israel?
It's a dramatic moment of victory, but first and foremost, it's an emotional moment. I'll give you just one example. On the way to the studio very early in the morning, I heard the news broadcaster, and something was peculiar about the broadcast. So I thought for a second maybe it's not stereo or something like this. Maybe there is a problem. And then I got it. For the first time in 2 years, there was the sentiment of pure joy in the air from the radio. For the last 2 years, Israel has marked many achievements, dramatic achievements in Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, but there was always something there, the hostages. And once they are out, in 72 hours from now, everyone is so happy to put this tragic chapter to an end.
And Amit, just from the sort of Palestinian perspective here, I mean, obviously there is cautious optimism. Gaza, of course, has been ravaged by 2 years of war. We've seen the video of buildings being completely decimated. We all know about the fact that the enclave is on the brink of famine and people there are really suffering. There's a lot of cautious optimism that phase 1 will, of course, come to pass. But the real issue is really about phase 2, this idea that somehow a temporary ceasefire could end up leading to some kind of permanent cessation of hostilities, especially when you think about the sticking points of Hamas laying down its weaponry. And there's a lot of fear that Netanyahu himself might sabotage this deal in terms of it going from phase 1 to ending up at phase 2. Are those fears on the Palestinian side justified, do you think, Amit?
So, first of all, I think it's not a cycle of violence, but a violence that began on October 7th. Gaza was a very peaceful place at the time, and they decided to attack Israel, to kill 1,200 Israelis with the support of almost each and every Gazan. I heard before in the report by one of your correspondents that the Gaza children are hoping to be back in school, and I have to say, I really hope that they don't come back to the schools where they were taught incitement, hatred, anti-Semitism, to murder people, where the math teachers taught that, how they taught first graders that Muhammad killed 4 Zionist pigs and Ahmad 5 Zionist pigs, so how much is it all together? I do hope that the plan set by President Trump will change Gaza once and for all. And the deal says as follows: Israel withdrawal versus demilitarization, disarmament, and putting an end to the Hamas regime in Gaza. Now, Israel controls 53% of the Gaza Strip, and it will withdraw once Hamas actually demilitarizes itself or demilitarized by the Emirati force. However, if it does not happen, and we have all the reasons to suspect that Hamas, as a murderous terrorist organization, will not be willing to give up the weapons and the tunnels, the IDF will be there to guarantee that no one ever try to behead, rape, and kill Israeli citizens who just want to live peacefully.
Amit, we also heard President Trump last night on Fox News describe his conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu and essentially saying, I told him now is time to end the war. You can't fight the world right now, and highlighted the fact that Israel, while it may have been achieving military wins, has really been isolated from much of the Western world over the last 2 years. I do want to ask you about the timing, because as we know, especially given U.S. pressure, Hamas has turned down better deals for them than this one that they just agreed to overnight. What, in your view, changed?
So I would say, and I think we spoke about it on September 7th, the day that Israel tried to assassinate Hamas leadership in Doha, that this is a crucial moment in the history of the Middle East and the war in Gaza, even if the assassination failed. And it failed, but it was the most successful failed assassination attempt that I know. Why? Because it signaled Qatar, the funder, the patron of Hamas, that it cannot get away with supporting Hamas. And President Trump, I think it's quite clear for everyone that President Trump supported and green-lighted this assassination attempt, although he tried to differentiate himself after. However, this conclusion made by Qatar alongside with the Israeli invasion into Gaza City, the last fortress of Hamas inside Gaza Strip, signaled that something here is different. From intelligence report, the reports that I read, I see that Hamas was horrified by the Israeli invasion to Gaza City. Why? Because they were under the impression that Israel is willing to give up the hostages. The number one asset of Hamas, the Israeli live hostages, was about to fade away. And that's the reason they decided to actually give it up. Unlike everyone thought in the first place. This is it. And if we take a look at the last 2 years, we know now something. Israel's invasion into Gaza was not a whim. It was in purpose to prevent other October 7th from happening. Now, for the first time, there was an offer that allows Israel to stay in Gaza Strip in the perimeter as long as Hamas does not dismantle itself. Once it was achieved and the hostages were not an ammunition in order to guarantee to be an insurance policy for the survival of Hamas as a terrorist regime, the deal was set.
And then, as Biana was talking about there, Israel's standing over the past 2 years on the world stage, I mean, it's really taken a blow, as I'm sure you know. Many of the Israelis that I've spoken to have been really heartbroken by a lot of the images, seeing innocent Palestinian women, children, families suffering with no clear end to the war in sight. As you point out, it is highly possible that Hamas isn't going to lay down its arms anytime soon. But at the same time, Israel's stated goal from the beginning in terms of dismantling and destroying Hamas is a very, very difficult goal to achieve. So based on those two things, what does an end to this war actually look like? We know that a lot of European countries are very much focused now on the potential, even though it seems very far-fetched in my eyes, of some kind of political solution that involves a two-state solution soon. That's what a lot of European countries are focused on. But this idea of Hamas potentially not giving up its weapons and at the same time Israel's goal of dismantling and destroying Hamas, which is highly unlikely in my view, how does this war eventually come to an end?
So Israel's presence inside Gaza Strip, 53% of the Gaza Strip territory, to be precise, is exactly the insurance policy that is supposed to ensure Hamas being dismantled. If it doesn't happen, the IDF forces will be there to protect Israeli citizens from getting massacred by Hamas. I'm not sure, or I'm quite sure, Hamas is not interested in the two-state solution. And I think it was a prize for Hamas. I think Hamas is interested in one fundamentalist Muslim state in which Jews and Christians are massacred, exactly as happened in those devastating 6 hours of October 7th. In the far future, I see an encouraging promise in the decision of the Emiratis to try and reform the Palestinian education system so it does not educate or does not poison the minds of young Palestinians. I think this is a necessary yet not sufficient ingredient condition to a peaceful future in the Middle East. As long as it does not happen, the last 2 years have taught Israel that the only guarantee to save the lives of Israelis is the force of the IDF. And many Israelis feel very sorry for the loss of life in Gaza. However, it did not emanate from an Israeli cruel decision to just kill as many Palestinians as it wishes, but from a massacre. No one in Israel was really interested on October 6, 2023, in invading Gaza and killing as many Palestinians as possible. This was the outcome. And the outcome was that Israel had to eliminate Hamas, which actually located his headquarters behind hospitals and kindergartens and schools, etc.
Amit, quickly, we are running out of time, but assuming that the reports have been accurate and perhaps overstated about the amount of pressure and the distance between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump to get here, it is pretty clear that President Trump ultimately made the decision that the war needs to come to an end, and Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't have many other options. Given that, and given that Israeli elections, are scheduled for next year, and they could come even sooner than October of next year. What is the likelihood, from what you're hearing, that President Trump has already suggested to Prime Minister Netanyahu that the sooner you end this war, the sooner you'll have my continued support in those next elections?
Over the last 5 years of the Trump two terms, we heard many times that they've had tensioned relationship. However, when it comes to results, they are the most coordinated leaders of Israel in the US in the history of the two countries. The results were attacking Iran's nuclear facilities, greenlighting the Israeli attack on Iran, giving for Israel to fight Gaza. I do think, like we talked last week, that this so-called American Trump plan is an Israeli plan orchestrated and written by Prime Minister Netanyahu and Minister Ron Dermer and wrapped in an American package. That's my knowledge. And from what I see, I don't see anything that can actually prove something else, at least so far.
All right. Amit Segal, a historic moment for all in the region today. Thank you so much for joining us.